Sometimes, life changes in the quietest moments. Not during a grand celebration. Not during a dramatic event. But during an ordinary afternoon, when two strangers unexpectedly cross paths. And on that quiet afternoon, inside a tall glass building overlooking the city, a tired single father opened the wrong door. Inside that room stood one of the most powerful women in the country. A billionaire CEO. But what happened next, neither of them could have imagined. Because that small awkward moment would quietly change both of their lives forever. The Moonrise Business Tower stood proudly over the downtown skyline. 40 stories of shining glass and steel reflecting the late afternoon sunlight. Inside the building, the workday was ending. Elevators hummed softly as executives hurried home. Office lights slowly switched off. But on the 32nd floor, a man in a gray maintenance jacket stepped out of the service elevator. His name was Michael Turner. Michael was 45 years old. His hair had begun to gray slightly near the temples, and the quiet lines on his face told the story of a man who had lived through both happiness and hardship. His jacket carried a small stitched patch. Moonrise Facilities Maintenance. Michael wasn't an executive. He didn't sit in boardrooms or make million-dollar decisions. His job was simple. Fixing broken lights. Repairing door handles. Checking heating systems. The kind of work people rarely notice, unless something stops working. And Michael was perfectly fine with that. 5 years earlier, life had changed for him. His wife, Sarah, had passed away after a long illness. Since then, Michael had been raising their daughter alone. Her name was Emily. Emily was 12 years old, bright, curious, and full of imagination. She loved science. She loved books. And every night when Michael came home from work, she would greet him with questions about how the world worked. Sometimes about space. Sometimes about machines. Sometimes about people. Michael always tried to answer as best he could. But more importantly, he tried to teach her something his own father once told him. Emily, life isn't about being the richest person in the room. It's about being the kindest. That afternoon, Michael walked quietly down the hallway carrying his toolbox. One of the large conference room doors had a loose handle. A simple repair. He expected the room to be empty. But when he gently pushed the door open, he stopped immediately. Inside the room stood a woman. And she looked just as surprised to see him. Her name was Charlotte Hayes. Charlotte Hayes was 43 years old. She was the founder and CEO of Hayes Innovations, a technology company valued at billions of dollars. Her face had appeared on magazine covers. Business news networks described her as one of the most influential leaders in modern technology. To the outside world, she was confident, powerful, unstoppable. But in that quiet conference room, Charlotte Hayes looked completely human. Her blonde hair rested softly on her shoulders. She wore a golden silk blouse and dark business skirt. Her wide eyes showed clear surprise at the sudden interruption. Michael quickly looked down at the floor. "Oh, I'm sorry," he said immediately. "I didn't realize anyone was here." He stepped backward toward the door. But Charlotte gently raised her hand. "No. Please wait." Her voice wasn't commanding like the voice of a powerful CEO. It sounded tired. Michael paused. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Outside the tall windows, the sun was slowly lowering toward the horizon. The city skyline glowed warmly in the fading light. Charlotte took a slow breath. "You're the maintenance technician, right?" "Yes, ma'am," Michael said politely. Charlotte gave a small smile. "I guess I chose the wrong place to hide for a few quiet minutes." Michael chuckled softly. "I think everyone needs quiet sometimes." Charlotte studied him for a moment. Most people she met spoke quickly, confidently, always trying to impress her. But Michael spoke calmly. Like someone who wasn't trying to prove anything. Charlotte slowly pulled out one of the conference chairs and sat down. "You wouldn't happen to have 5 minutes, would you?" she asked gently. Michael hesitated. Maintenance workers usually didn't sit in executive conference rooms. But something in her voice felt sincere. So he placed his toolbox down and sat across from her. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. The city lights slowly began to appear outside the window. Finally Charlotte said something unexpected. "Do you ever notice something strange about success?" Michael tilted his head slightly. "What do you mean?" Charlotte looked out at the skyline. "The higher people climb in life, the lonelier it sometimes becomes." Michael nodded slowly. "My father used to say something similar." Charlotte looked curious. "He drove a delivery truck for 30 years, Michael said. One evening he told me, "Son, don't work so hard that you forget how to enjoy a quiet sunset." Charlotte smiled softly. "That sounds like a wise man." "He didn't have much money," Michael said. "But he always seemed peaceful." Charlotte looked down at her hands. "Peace," she whispered. For the first time in weeks, Charlotte Hayes was sitting quietly, not thinking about business reports or investor meetings. Just breathing. Just talking. After a moment she asked, "Do you have children?" "One daughter," Michael replied proudly. "Emily." "How old?" 12. Charlotte's expression softened. "My father raised me alone too." Michael smiled warmly. "Then you know how strong that bond becomes." Charlotte nodded slowly. "Yes, I do." For the next half hour, they talked. Not about business. Not about money. They talked about childhood memories. About simple family dinners. About how quickly time passes as people grow older. Michael told her how Emily once tried to build a robot using an old toaster and flashlight batteries. Charlotte laughed. "That sounds like an engineer already." "She dreams about building machines that help people," Michael said. Charlotte leaned back thoughtfully. "Maybe she should visit our robotics lab someday." Michael looked surprised. "You'd really allow that?" Charlotte smiled warmly. "Sometimes companies forget who the future really belongs to. Children remind us." A week later, Michael and Emily walked into the Hayes Innovations Robotics Laboratory. Emily's eyes were wide with amazement. Robotic arms carefully assembled tiny components. Small machines moved across the floor like something from a science fiction movie. Emily whispered, "Dad, this place is incredible." Charlotte stood nearby watching quietly. But she wasn't thinking about business. She was watching Emily laugh. Watching Michael smile. And suddenly, Charlotte remembered something she had nearly forgotten. Her own father. The man who worked long hours, but always made time to sit with her on the porch and watch the sunset. For the first time in many years, Charlotte Hayes felt something different. Not ambition. Not pressure. But warmth. Because sometimes life doesn't change through dramatic moments. Sometimes it changes quietly. Through a simple conversation. Through kindness between strangers. Through the realization that success is not measured by wealth or power. The richest life is the one filled with kindness. With patience. With human connection. And on that quiet afternoon, a hardworking father and a powerful CEO both remembered something important. No matter how different our lives may seem, kindness has a way of bringing people together. And sometimes, the most important doors in life are the ones we open by accident. A few weeks passed after Michael and Emily visited the Hayes Innovations Robotics Laboratory. For Emily, it had been one of the most exciting days of her life. But for Charlotte Hayes, it had been something far more meaningful. For the first time in many years, the billionaire CEO had spent an entire afternoon not thinking about profits, meetings, or investors. Instead, she had watched a young girl discover the joy of curiosity. And it reminded her of something she had nearly forgotten. The simple happiness of learning. The following Monday morning, Charlotte sat in her large office on the top floor of the tower. The room was elegant but quiet. A large wooden desk. Tall glass windows. And a city skyline stretching endlessly into the distance. Her assistant was reviewing a list of meetings scheduled for the day. 10 o'clock with the investors, the assistant said. 11:30 with the board. Lunch with the marketing team. Charlotte listened quietly. Then she gently raised her hand. "Cancel the lunch meeting." Her assistant blinked in surprise. "Is everything all right?" Charlotte smiled slightly. "Yes. I just need a different kind of meeting today." Later that afternoon, Michael was working in the building basement repairing a heating pipe when his phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. "Hello," he answered. "Michael," the voice said warmly. It was Charlotte. Michael was surprised. "Miss Hayes." "I hope I'm not interrupting your work," she said. "Not at all," Michael replied. Charlotte hesitated slightly before speaking again. "I was wondering if you and Emily might like to join me for dinner this Friday." Michael paused. Dinner with a billionaire CEO was certainly not something he had ever expected. But Charlotte continued gently. "Nothing fancy," she said. "Just a quiet restaurant. Emily mentioned she likes astronomy, and there's something I'd like to show her." Michael smiled. "I think she would like that very much." Friday evening arrived. Michael and Emily stood outside a small restaurant overlooking the river. It wasn't a luxurious place, but it was warm and welcoming. Inside, Charlotte was already waiting at a corner table. She stood when they approached. Emily smiled shyly. "Hi, Miss Hayes." Charlotte smiled warmly.
"Please, call me Charlotte." Dinner was simple. Soup, fresh bread,
And quiet conversation. Emily excitedly talked about her dream of building machines that could help doctors save lives. Charlotte listened carefully. "You know," Charlotte said, "when I was your age, I wanted to build things too."
"Really?" Emily asked. Charlotte nodded.
"My father used to bring home broken radios from his job, and we would take them apart together at the kitchen table." Emily's eyes lit up. "That sounds fun." Charlotte laughed softly.
It was.
Then she reached into her bag and placed a small object on the table. It was a small metal key. Emily looked confused. "What's that?"
Charlotte smiled.
"It's a key to our student innovation lab." Emily's eyes widened.
"You mean
"I can visit again."
Charlotte nodded.
"Not just visit.
You can build."
Michael looked surprised. "That's incredibly generous." Charlotte shook her head gently.
"No, it's an investment."
In the future. Over the next several months, something unexpected happened. Michael, Emily, and Charlotte slowly became friends. Not the kind of friendship people read about in newspapers.
A quiet friendship.
One built on simple moments. Sometimes they had dinner together. Sometimes Charlotte visited Emily's school science fair. Sometimes Michael helped Charlotte fix small things in her apartment that she never had time to repair. And through it all, they each learned something. Emily learned that powerful people could also be kind. Michael learned that success did not always make someone distant. And Charlotte learned something she had forgotten long ago. That life was not meant to be lived alone. One evening, almost a year after their first meeting, Charlotte stood on the rooftop of the Moonrise Tower. The city lights sparkled below. Michael stood beside her. "You know," Charlotte said quietly, "that day you walked into the conference room. I had just finished one of the hardest meetings of my career." Michael looked curious.
"What happened?"
Charlotte smiled softly. "I was about to sell half my company." Michael raised an eyebrow.
"Why?"
Charlotte looked out at the skyline. "Because I thought success meant growing faster and faster, no matter the cost."
She paused.
"But then we talked."
Michael smiled.
"I don't remember giving business advice."
Charlotte laughed. "You didn't."
"You reminded me of something better." "What's that?" Charlotte looked toward the horizon where the sun was slowly setting. "That success means nothing if you have no one to share life with." Downstairs in the robotics lab, Emily was finishing a small project she had been working on for months. A tiny robotic arm designed to help elderly people pick up objects without bending down. When Charlotte saw it, she smiled proudly.
"Emily," she said,
"I think you just built something that could help thousands of people." Emily's face lit up with excitement. Michael looked at Charlotte. "Looks like your investment is already paying off." Charlotte shook her head gently.
"No.
The real investment happened the day you walked into that room." Sometimes life changes through grand events.
But more often,
It changes through quiet kindness.
through small moments.
Through unexpected friendships.
And in the end, a hardworking father,
A curious young girl. And a billionaire CEO. All discovered the same simple truth. The greatest success in life is not measured in money. It is measured in the lives we touch along the way.